Yo, fantasy freaks, degenerate gamblers, friends, haters, whoever's watching, thanks for tuning in. My name is Glenn. This is DFS Proptology, and we are about to enter into Week 11 of the NFL season. So it's time for an early look video, and let's see which players at each position have the best matchup heading into this weekend. Here we're looking at a list of the 6 teams giving up the most passing yards to the quarterback position so far this season. We're going to start at the bottom of the list and talk about the Indianapolis Colts traveling to New York to face Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. The Jets do have the second most pass attempts on the season, and Aaron Rodgers is sitting 7th overall in passing yards. So this is a pass-friendly offense in a really good matchup. I haven't bet on Aaron Rodgers yet this season. I don't know what my holdup is. I guess it's a 40-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles injury. You know, the guy played, 2 snaps last season. Technically, you could say 3 snaps if you count the Achilles. But you know what I'm saying. A lot of questions heading into this season. And then you hear stories that he's rehabbing with medicine made from hallucinogenic mushrooms. Like, that makes you think, Christ almighty, is there a real-world possibility, as slim as it may be, that this guy starts a game in the NFL while tripping on mushrooms? Could you imagine? I don't know if you've ever eaten mushrooms or not before, but I have. And I remember one time getting stuck in a Taco Bell, completely confused and perplexed by their menu. I laughed hysterically for what felt like several minutes until I ran out of there. I can't even imagine trying to decipher an NFL defense while tripping balls on mushrooms. Are you kidding me? I could see it now. Rodgers takes the snap. He looks back to complete a pass over the middle, feels some pressure to the left side, glances back, sees a linebacker rushing him with 6 arms. That'd be nuts. We'll talk about the Colts a little bit later in this video when we get to running backs. That's really where I like to attack this defense. Next on the list, we have the Detroit Lions. They're facing the Jacksonville Jaguars. Too early in the week to make a decision here, but basically, if Mac Jones is in, then I'm out. The next team, we have the New Orleans Saints, and they're facing the Cleveland Browns. Now, the Browns have the 8th most pass attempts on the season, and they're 29th in rush attempts. This is a team that's been throwing the ball all season, and that has not changed now that Jameis Winston's taken over. In his first game, he faced Baltimore. He threw the ball 41 times for 334 yards. And in his second game, faced a much tougher pass defense in the LA Chargers, but he still threw the ball 46 times for 235 yards in that game. As much as I hate it, I think I'm in on this bet. I'm at least considering it.
The coin after I say one thing. Let's go. That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W. How many people want to eat a W tonight? How many eat a W tonight? Yeah, come in, man.
Next up, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars traveling to Detroit to face the Lions and Jared Goff. This looks like a great matchup for Goff on the surface. You have Jacksonville giving up the 3rd most passing yards on the season, facing this high-octane Lions offense. But I'm not so sure. Goff, only 231 passing yards on the season, and over the last 4, only 187 yards per game. And with Mac Jones at the helm for the Jaguars, I'm really afraid they're not going to be able to put up the points to stay competitive with a pissed-off Lions team coming off a loss. I just see a likely scenario where they go up early, they get up by a lot, and then you just get a lot of Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery running it down their throat. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, unfortunately, on a bye this week, so we can't take advantage of that horrific pass offense, but they've been getting torched through the air, so look for them next week. But at the top of the list, we have the gift that keeps giving, this Baltimore pass defense, giving up the most by far through the air to the quarterback position, 295 yards per game. Now, I know they're the Baltimore Ravens, but this year, in terms of pass defense, they look a lot more like the Black Crows because they are in desperate need of a remedy.
I need a remedy.
Baltimore travels to Pittsburgh to play the Steelers, now led by Russell Wilson. Wilson was inserted as the starting quarterback 3 games ago. He's averaging 245 yards per game, and that number was actually drugged down a little bit in his last performance where he threw for only 195 against Washington. But the game before that against the Giants, he threw for 278, and against the Jets, a really good pass defense, he threw for 264. So as far as quarterback props, I'm leaning towards Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson. Wow. I better have plenty of booze on hand this weekend. Now let's take a quick peek at some pass catchers, specifically wide receivers. Here are the 8 teams giving up the most yards to the wide receiver position so far this season. And starting again at the bottom of the list, we have the Indianapolis Colts facing the New York Jets. So we have Devontae Adams or Garrett Wilson in play. Both are great players, both in great matchups. Either one's a fine play. Above them, we have the Cleveland Browns going against New Orleans Saints. The Saints have too many injuries to the wide receiver room right now. I don't know who's going to be getting the ball. Not interested there. Tampa Bay's on a bye, so that moves us to Jacksonville facing the Detroit Lions. And that brings us to Amon-Ra St. Brown. I love this guy, but he has not been getting there. Maybe he's due in this great matchup. And I think the line's going to come out probably in the mid-60s. It's going to be too tempting for me to pass. I know I'm going to play him again. And then later this week, Jameson Williams' line will come out. As long as it's reasonable, I think I'll play that as well. Next, we get to talk about this revamped Cleveland Browns wide receiver room and the emergence of Cedric Tillman. Since the trade of Amari Cooper, Tillman's got into the starting lineup, and he has run with that opportunity. In his first game against Cincy, he had 12 targets, 8 receptions, 81 yards. He followed that up with a game against Baltimore where he had 9 targets, 7 receptions, 99 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And then in his last game, 11 targets, 6 catches, 75 yards, and a touchdown against the Chargers. Now he faces a Saints team giving up the 4th most receiving yards on the season. I imagine the line's going to come out somewhere in the mid-50s, and I'll probably be interested. Next up, we have the Tennessee Titans facing the Minnesota Vikings, who are giving up the 3rd most receiving yards on the season. That makes Calvin Ridley kind of an interesting play. Ridley's coming off 3 fantastic games. One against the Chargers where he had 5 catches for 84 yards. Another one against New England with 5 catches for 73 yards. And then 3 weeks ago against Detroit, 10 catches for 143 yards. The problem with Ridley and this whole Tennessee offense, for that matter, is just consistency. The 2 weeks before that, Ridley had 9 targets with only 3 catches for 42 yards at Buffalo. And then against Indy, 8 targets, 0 catches, a big goose egg. So as long as you can stomach the inconsistency and the fact that Will Levis is going to be throwing them the passes, it is a great matchup. Then we have Jacksonville. Same rules apply early in the week. Basically, if Mac Jones is in, I'm out, and that includes his receiving options. So that leaves our old friend Baltimore facing Pittsburgh and old George Pickens. Pickens kind of suffering from the same situation as Ridley, a little bit of inconsistency. The last 3 games have been fantastic. Against Washington, he had 5 catches for 91 yards. Against the Giants, he had 4 catches for 74 yards. Against the Jets, he had 5 catches for 111 yards. But then the 2 weeks before that, against the Raiders, only 3 catches and 53 yards. And then against Dallas, 3 catches for only 26 yards. Here's a look at a few teams giving up the most yards to the tight end position this season. We have Tampa Bay on a bye. We have Kansas City, who's the best matchup, facing Buffalo, who has an injured tight end in Dalton Kincaid. It's Monday. I still don't know what his status is. If he's out, maybe we could look at Dawson Knox. And then we have Baltimore facing Pittsburgh, so we could think about Pat Freiermuth as a possibility. Now let's take a look at some running backs that have really good matchups heading into this weekend. Here are the 7 teams giving up the most yards on the ground so far this season. Now, unfortunately, the Panthers and the Giants, 2 teams that I love to target with running backs, are both on a bye this week, so we will not be able to go there. But there's some other spots we can look at. The Saints go up against the Cleveland Browns. That puts Nick Chubb's name in discussion. Chubb, of course, coming back from a serious knee injury. He's only played in 3 games so far. His best game was his second game get back against a tough Baltimore run defense where he rushed 16 times for 52 yards. I imagine this line against the Saints is going to come out right around 50. And if it does, I think it's worth at least considering. Then we have Saquon Barkley going up against the Washington Commanders on Thursday night. Now, Barkley's been on fire, but I know this line's going to come out in the low to mid-90s. It's going to be a high number, and it's going to be short rest on Thursday night. I'll probably skip it, and then I'll probably regret it. The 3 matchups that I really like are these next 3. You have Kyren Williams going against the New England Patriots, who have not been able to stop the run all year. You have Breece Hall going up against the Colts, another team getting decimated by the run. And then maybe my favorite matchup, Christian McCaffrey going up against the Seahawks. Now, McCaffrey, of course, only played 1 game last week back from injury, but he was on the field for 89% of the plays. No question, no concerns about his limitations. I say bet with confidence. Okay, guys, that's going to be our video for the day. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you got some useful information. If you did, consider subscribing so you can get this info as soon as it gets released. And if you haven't already, leave me a like. It really helps support the channel. Good luck on all your bets this week. And remember, bet, pray, win.